What can you tell us about this case so far and where things stand today?
Well, he's still detained, and he will be until a hearing in district court coming up either at the end of this week or the first part of next week, and then we'll proceed with some more formal charging documents and go from there.
My colleague Von Hilliard is on the ground, and it's clear that he was a menace known to some of the victims. Can you tell us, I mean, this investigation was kept out of the public arena to protect the investigation, but was he always a suspect?
You know, I don't know that he was somewhat, but certainly I think we found the pieces to the puzzle when APD did a tremendous job. Our Albuquerque Police Department did a tremendous job on putting some of these pieces together, and we now believe we have certainly more than enough evidence to proceed with these charges, obviously. And yeah, I mean, we obviously want to protect the integrity of the investigation, so we're not disclosing a lot of it, but we did know about many of these things leading up to this.
And I just want to read from the arrest warrant from Mr. Pena, because we have a privilege of speaking to lots of election officials and elected officials, and I think this is everyone's nightmare, certainly everyone or anyone with family or kids at home. If I could just read this to you. State Senator Linda Lopez heard loud bangs but dismissed them as fireworks at the time. She did not observe any immediate damage to her house. During this time, State Senator Linda Lopez's 10-year-old daughter told her mother that she believed a spider woke her up by crawling on her face. Linda went to sleep with her daughter in her bed. While in bed, Linda's daughter asked why it felt like there was sand in the bed. A few hours later, at daylight, Linda Lopez noticed that there were holes in her house, apparently from gunfire. She called police at 7:42 in the morning. Officers arrived and learned that Linda and her daughter woke up at the time of the gunfire. They heard a loud number of bangs. As it turned out, sheetrock dust was blown onto Linda's daughter's face and bed, resulting from firearm projectiles passing inside her bedroom overhead. It is a story both of the meticulousness of the investigation, but also of how close your community came to an absolutely horrific tragedy.
And it is a tragedy in so many ways right now still, because this is an attack on democracy. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat, but when you are using violence to attack elected officials, it is so unacceptable. It's beyond the pale. And I think everybody in this community is outraged and, quite frankly, pissed off about it, and so are we here at the DA's office. And we're going to make sure that we bring this person to justice. Obviously, anybody that's charged is innocent until proven, and unless they're proven guilty in a court of law. But at the same time, we believe, obviously, and the judge found probable cause so far in our criminal complaint this earlier today, that we have the necessary evidence to go forward, and we will make sure we do everything we can to bring justice to this individual. And obviously, when you talk about an attack on democracy, when you talk about trying to intimidate elected officials, trying to terrify them and their families, it is outrageous conduct. It will not stand.
How much of the national conversation is a part of this suspect's profile? Well,
listen, I think you've probably seen and you know some of the postings he's made and the election denying stuff. But you know, I'm a firm and strong believer in the First Amendment and people's ability to talk about what they choose to talk about. But everybody needs to be aware that when you are taking things to an extreme, and you have people, this unfortunately may be the next step to extremism that we're seeing here in Albuquerque. It's a problem now in this community. It's a problem, I think, across the country, that we've now had it so that politics is becoming violent politics, and that is just unacceptable. We need to make sure we continue to have the respect for the rule of law. We're going to make sure of it here.
You know, one of the Capitol Police officers who responded to the January 6th insurrection pleaded with Congress. His name's Harry Dunn, and he made the point not just to find the foot soldiers, but to find the people who hired them and who sent them. And it seems that your law enforcement and legal work so far, you found the person who hired 4 people to go out and shoot at Democratic election officials. I wonder what you think about getting to the root of what you're talking about, the lies about election denialism. This was an individual who didn't lose in a close election. It's my understanding he lost by 50 percentage points. Do you think that someone who lost by 50 percentage points would resort to violence if the national conversation wasn't dominated in one party by conversations of rigged and stolen elections?
I can't speak with any kind of certainty towards that, but I can tell you that what happens when we have this kind of extremism, postings about politics and elections, unfortunately, this may be the result of exactly that. I mean, you can see from his postings in the past that this is a man who walked up to literally the homes of some of these elected officials to complain about how he knocked on every door and therefore he should have had all the votes he needed. But it's just outrageous behavior. And I can only tell you that every elected official from the local level, the state level, and obviously the national level needs to take a good look at what's going on here in our politics in this country, because we can't lose respect for the rule of law. We can't get to a situation where in any way violence, when it comes to your political views, that you want to terrify, intimidate, threaten elected officials, regardless of what they say. I mean, what happens next is people start worrying about whether or not they really want to expose their families to being an elected official because it may be dangerous for them. And that is the last thing we want. We want our democracy to work and people to participate in it. And that's why this case is so important to this office, to this community, because this is an attack on everyone when it comes to democracy.
Yeah, and I want to ask your opinion. I mean, we have talked about it in the context of the violent attack and targeting of Speaker Pelosi and her husband, Paul Pelosi, of the targeting of the United States Capitol and what those law enforcement officials described as hand-to-hand combat that was medieval. Do you view what has happened in your community as part of that broader conversation about a rise in people turning to violence when the political process doesn't result in their desired outcome?
Well, we're obviously seeing it. I mean, we are obviously seeing that play out here. We believe that this was absolutely politically motivated, and that's a sad statement for our country, for our democracy, and for our local community. And I can tell you that everybody's here is very upset with it, and that's why we're going to do everything we can to bring justice.
As an important part of protecting your community and sort of standing on that line when it comes to the rule of law, would it be helpful if prominent Republicans condemned political violence? Would that help you protect your community?
Well, I think overall, I can tell you the local legislators here, certainly, regardless of Republican or Democrats, were outraged as well. I mean, every elected official needs to know that if this can happen here to these individuals, who next can it happen? We have to make, I understand political rhetoric, I understand that, but at the same time, we have to be careful in what we are constantly throwing out there as political rhetoric, because people who are a convicted felon like this individual was, can resort to this kind of behavior after they lose an election and think that violence is the solution to them losing an election. And it isn't. But we have to be careful as all elected leaders to make sure, because otherwise the next person's going to be the next elected official in the community next door, or the state next door, or of course what we saw in Washington. So it's really important that I think everybody recognize and calm down. And you ask whether or not I thought that Republicans should do it. I think everybody should do what they can to kind of tone down the political posting of garbage, quite frankly, out there, and just focus on what their issues may be, because you do have crazy things that are resulting from this. And people are in this case, thank God no one was physically hurt, but I can tell you emotionally, they were very scarred and they continue to be scarred, and they're scared and their families are scared, and that's unacceptable in a democracy.
Has there ever been any example of an election being wrong by 50%? I mean, this idea of fraud, of a result that was off by 50%, is there any precedent for that in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Not in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I don't think there is in New Mexico either. I'd be surprised. I'm no election expert, but I'd be surprised if there's much of that anywhere in this country, especially in a situation like this. So no is the short answer, not that I know of.
District Attorney Sam Bregman, you, like all of the leaders that we've seen, we've carried every press conference that has happened, and you are all exactly what I think Americans want in their elected officials, protecting your community and telling the truth and sharing the facts of this case when it is possible to do so with the media. So all of our gratitude to you. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you very much.